Hi, my name is Bart Brinkman. I'm an engineer in the Cisco wireless engineering team, and I've done a lot of work on OpenRoaming.
So one of the things we were looking at yesterday in the knock, in the other video, was just around the adoption of OpenRoaming at the show. Kind of surprised me, that's like 30 to 40% of the overall uptake. How did we get there? What are we doing now over the last years that's different than before?
Okay, we have two very distinct type of use cases here. One of them, you probably saw a lot of Cisco ID, right? So that's like an identity that's integrated into the Cisco app here, right? This is what we call a loyalty experience. So it's like your VIP experience tied to the venue. You automatically come on with your loyalty ID. There's a lot of value for the venue because they get to kind of work with you, see what you're doing, communicate with you. There's notifications going back as well. The second type you may have seen is service provider identities, okay? Now, service provider identities are used a lot in cases where venues want to like bring service provider customers indoor, so basically for indoor coverage. We're seeing a lot now that enterprises are looking at the old DAS systems that they've deployed, and they're looking at a potentially multi-million dollar or euro investment to replace those, and it just doesn't make sense anymore because every service provider supports Wi-Fi calling and SIM-based onboarding onto Wi-Fi networks with, for example, OpenRoaming. So they're basically looking at, okay, can I leverage my existing Wi-Fi network to provide indoor coverage as well?
So one of the things that comes to mind, we did see a lot of stats there, like even the US customers, AT&T, T-Mobile, I think we saw on the list. One of the questions comes up is, how do I deal with massive influx of users in the network if they're doing Wi-Fi calling? How do I handle QoS in these types of environments? What are we thinking about in that term?
All right, so it's actually surprising, but what we see in most customers is that the amount of traffic that these use cases add are somewhere between like 2 and 20%. So it's not like a big deal. Obviously, if you go into like a venue like Cisco Live, you got tens of thousands of people, that's a different use case. But in this kind of standard enterprise use case, the amount of traffic is not that big. So what is important is obviously that you enable kind of IPsec out to the EPDGs of the carriers, and that potentially you can offer quality of service there on the.
Gotcha. Anything we're doing kind of creatively from thought leadership in this space as far as like emergency preparedness calling? And I noted there were some things in the Wi-Fi 7 spec around that. What's our thinking there?
So I think one of the things we're looking at is in these use cases where there's no cellular indoor coverage, typically an emergency call will fall back to cellular. But if there's no cellular, obviously you're in trouble. So what we're doing is we're working on solutions in which we can actually use OpenRoaming and the service provider profiles, but also emergency profiles that go into your phone. So you can, when you go into your emergency dialer, that your phone automatically connects to the network, makes a Wi-Fi call, but also in the SIP request includes your location, so emergency responders can find where you are in the building. And then obviously when the emergency responders come in with their profiles, they attach to the Wi-Fi network as well.
How is that location being derived? Is it primarily through GPS, or are we leveraging any Wi-Fi infrastructure to do?
We are leveraging Wi-Fi infrastructure to do that, yeah. So we leverage Wi-Fi, FTM and RSSI to let the device actually locate itself and then send that information.
Very cool, very cool. Last kind of question I think would be around, if I'm a customer and I'm struggling, I don't necessarily in my region have carrier offload available.
Yeah.
What's that path look like for a customer? How do I go from no offload to potentially offering this to my people in my buildings or my campus?
Yeah, there's a few paths. What we typically see is that the customer drives the demand. So what happens is obviously we go talk to service providers about this, we talk to regulators about this, but what really helps is when customers go to their service provider and say, look, this is how we want to do this, that has typically driven service providers to come talk to Cisco and say, okay, how can we get into using Wi-Fi offload for indoor coverage. The other thing we're working very closely with device manufacturers as well, on kind of embedding this functionality with identities other than service providers, like the Google ID, the Samsung ID, and that are available today. And then obviously we'd like to get all the device manufacturers to support that as well.
I guess one other question that comes to my mind is around laptops and non-mobile devices in OpenRoaming. What is that looking like? How are we going with provisioning of the cert onto the device? What is the trajectory there?
Okay, so non-mobile devices obviously also support OpenRoaming. You can download the identities from a website, for example. And there's some work ongoing also on kind of integrating that more closely into operating systems as well, that hopefully we'll be able to talk about.
Very
soon.
good.
Yeah.
Anything further you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.